What's going on, guys and gals? Kendall here with Renos for Pros and Joes, and I am back with the second installment of how to remove tile from a concrete floor. And in this video, we're going to be tackling thinset. In the previous video, we covered tile and kind of went through some of the best ways to do that. Thinset is a completely different animal, and the reason for that is the amount of dust that is created when you begin to remove it from the floor. So hopefully in the first video you saw that we are not using hand tools to remove tile from concrete. You're going to beat yourself up way too much and unnecessarily if you've got a decent sized job to do. So we are using a demolition hammer with a tile scraping attachment. And so that's what we're going to be using in this video to remove the thinset from the floor. However, there's still some best practices and as well as some things we want to kind of explore in this video. For one, you will see me jump back and forth between a 12-pound demo hammer and a 20-pound demo hammer. And so one is obviously more powerful than the other, and they're also different height profiles. So just be on the lookout for that as you see me working. One thing to be mindful of is the amount of dust that is created when you are running these demolition hammers. The scraper tool is doing exactly what it says it does. It is scraping across the surface of the concrete and it is knocking the thinset loose from the floor. And so as a result, quite a bit of that thinset turns to dust and becomes airborne. So if you can see me here in the video kind of dancing around here with the vacuum hose, I'm trying to get up as much of that as possible, and I'm running the vacuum as I'm working. However, it is definitely still creating some dust as I'm working here. So as you can see here, I am working with the 12-pound hammer here, and I'm kind of just going around the edges here and trying to get up as much of the thinset as I can and just getting a really good feel for how well this tool is going to remove the thinset from this particular concrete floor. And it is going pretty good. However, there is quite a bit of dust that's being created, so I am going to try a few different techniques as we work through this thing. Now, if you look here closely, you're going to see me remove the scraper blade from the 12-pound hammer, and then I just popped it into the 20-pound hammer that's laying over there on the side. I'm going to clean my work area up here once again just to try to manage the amount of dust that is floating around, and then I'm going to splash a little bit of water on the floor here. The idea behind putting the water on the floor is that it is helping to minimize the amount of dust because it's now making the thinset heavier and making it harder for it to become airborne when I begin to use the scraper tool again. So it kind of essentially turns the thinset more into a mud instead of turning it into a powder form, which is easier for it to become airborne. So as you can see here, now I'm working with the 20-pound hammer, and as you can see, I'm making some passes here across the floor. It may or may not be working quite as well as the 12-pound hammer. In doing this type of work, you have to also be mindful of how your body is feeling and reacting as you're doing the work. And so what I can tell you, one of the things that immediately became very noticeable for me was the difference in the height of working with the different tools. So the 20-pound hammer is actually taller, and I mean taller without the attachment on it and taller with the attachment attached. And the difference that that makes is that it changes your posture and the height at which, or the angle at which you're able to stand in order to work the tool. So essentially with the 12-pound hammer, I have to bend and lean over more because the tool is shorter, and this creates more stress on the lower back. And so I would say that the 20-pound hammer definitely is easier to work with from a labor standpoint. With regards to your ability to scrape the thinset off the floor most efficiently, I probably would say that the 12-pound hammer works a little bit better. And so you can see here that I have stopped again and I am in the process of changing out. So I changed out just that quickly back to the 12 pound. So if you can remember in the initial video, I was using the 12 and the 20 to remove the tile, and the 20 pound worked a lot better to remove the tile initially from the concrete, or separate it from the concrete. And the 12 pound would also get the job done, but it seemed to be taking a lot more effort from the machine in order to do so. With the Thinset, it's a different situation. The power of the 20 pound hammer is no longer a big advantage to getting the Thinset off the floor, because if I'm not mistaken, the 12 pound hammer is actually moving at a faster speed, which in this case means that it's scraping the floor faster, which means that it can knock the Thinset off easier. And as you can see here, you can kind of tell that it seems to be doing a bit of a cleaner job with removing the Thinset as well. I've changed angles here and I'm going around the edges here, so you can probably see some of the dust that's created as I'm working in this area that does not have water on the floor. And so as we go back over here and keep working from the edges over here where we've got some moisture, you can kind of see that the Thinset is almost rolling up off the floor like clay or like mud. So that's a great situation, because all that debris would normally be forced into the air by using the demo hammer without putting moisture on the floor. So in an effort to minimize dust, I would definitely recommend adding a little bit of moisture to the floor. As I said, I just sprinkled a little bit of water, or poured a little bit of water on the floor, and that made a huge difference. Now, one caveat to this is that you want to make sure that you pour the water on the floor in a controlled manner, because you don't want the floor to get slippery and wet. And you also need to be aware that the concrete or the Thinset is going to kind of turn into mush and kind of become a little muddy and slightly messy as you begin to work with it. So it's no longer going to be dry like the dust. So it is going to take a little bit more effort to clean it up off of the floor. However, the trade-off is you're not going to have to clean it up off of everything in the entire room, because when you're doing this type of work and you don't have any type of dust control and you're not putting moisture on your Thinset, that dust is going to become airborne. It's going to go everywhere, which means it's going to get on the walls, it's going to get on the ceiling, it's going to get on the doors. And if you're doing a project like this where we're basically going to be overhauling everything in the space, that's ultimately going to come back to haunt you, because you're going to have to paint all these surfaces, and you're going to want all those surfaces to be clean and as free of dust and debris as possible before you begin that stage of work. So essentially, you'd be creating a large cleanup project for yourself unnecessarily. So take the time and take the steps to make sure that you're able to control the dust as best you can. In some scenarios, you may be able to control dust with opening up a window and able to get some type of air circulation and movement in the room to help that way. In the space that I'm working with here, there are no windows that open. There is only a glass block window over the garden tub that we took out, and that obviously does not go up and down, and so we're limited to work within this space. And as you can see, the majority of the space here that we're working in has tile on the floor, so it'd be difficult to set a machine in this room in order to try to address some of that dust. And you can see there that you can clearly see here that the vacuum is on, because you can see that some of that dust coming off the edge of the scraper, and it's immediately getting sucked into the vacuum. So I'm using a shop vacuum here with a green HEPA filter inside, which is my favorite one to use because it does a really good job of capturing the dust. Now I'm jumping back over here to my shovel so that you can see how much dust we've turned into mud. So obviously a lot of that dust would have become airborne and would have created a huge mess. So hopefully you found this video informative. Stay tuned for the next installment of this bathroom renovation project. Thanks for watching, and I will see you guys on the next one.